All right, hello students, this is Mr. Torres. I just wanted to take a moment to make a video for any students who were having trouble understanding syntax and how sentence construction can create meaning in poetry. So this video is going to be a review of what we talked about in class, and you can refer back to it if you're having any confusion or if you just want to review for anything coming up, such as a test or an essay or anything like that. Okay, so to start off, what we are going to be talking about in this video specifically is syntax. Okay, and syntax is a pretty simple definition. It is the way sentences are constructed or put together. Okay, so syntax, it's a simple definition, but at first it can be pretty difficult for students to understand how sentences, the construction of sentences, how it creates meaning is a difficult concept for students to understand. But hopefully this video will kind of help iron out any of those, confusing thoughts that you may have. Okay, so this video, we are going to use the poem Half Hanged Mary. We're also going to be looking at the handout that you were given in class, the poetry notating instructions with the models for how to talk about syntax. And then we're going to be using the device to meaning chart that we have that was given to you in class as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about syntax. Again, syntax is the way sentences are constructed. And as I said in class, it might be a little bit of a difficult concept to understand. So let's just look at the first section of the poem, okay? And I want you to look at these sentences, and I want you to notice that these sentences are constructed a little bit differently than we're used to seeing sentences in a story or in a book or something like that. And I talked to you about whenever you were making your recording of you reading this poem, I told you or reminded you that sentences are, that poetry is meant to be read sentence by sentence and not line by line. Okay, and so if you look at the sentences here in this poem, you'll notice that the sentences all continue on to different lines. Rumor was loose in the air, hunting for some neck to land on. Okay, that's one sentence divided into two lines. And so we're going to draw a bracket around that sentence. I was milking the cow, the barn door open to the sunset. I'm going to draw a bracket around that sentence as well. And so every time I see a complete sentence in the first stanza, I'm going to just draw a bracket around it. And you'll notice that in the 1 to 3rd stanza of the 7 p.m. section, the sentence goes all the way into the 4th stanza. So it comes up here to the up until the 8 p.m. section. Okay. And when you have sentences that continue onto different lines, for instance, rumor was loose in the air, hunting for some neck to land on, we call this an enjambment. Okay, and an enjambment, again, is when sentences, and this is in poetry, when sentences continue onto separate lines, they are broken into multiple lines, okay? And so we have an enjambment here, This is an enjambed sentence. And so you'll notice that all of the sentences in the first section, the 7 p.m. section, are all enjambed, okay? So the question is, why are these sentences enjambed? What is, okay, so what, Torres, right? That's the big question, is why. And I want you to think about this question, okay? I want you to think about enjambed sentences as broken ideas, okay? So this is a thought that is broken into 2 lines. So we have broken thoughts, okay? Maybe half thoughts, not fully formed, okay? So I want you to think about the situation that Merriam-Webster is in the 7 p.m. section, okay? She says she was milking the cow, the barn door open to the sunset, okay? And as she's doing this, these people, these men from the village, they break into her barn, and they start to beat and torture and eventually hang her, right? I was hanged for living alone, okay? So how do these broken thoughts, these half thoughts, these not fully formed thoughts, how do they create meaning? That's the question, okay? And so again, I want you to think about the situation that Merriam-Webster is in. And in this moment, when the men are attacking her and cursing at her and beating her and torturing her, this is a very chaotic and confusing moment, okay? When these men kind of burst into her barn, okay? And in chaotic and confusing moments, we are often thinking or trying to figure out what is happening to us. We are confused. And when you're confused, you're trying to figure out what is happening. And when you try to figure out what is happening, the facts and thoughts come into your mind piece by piece. Okay? So in a chaotic situation, you're very, very confused and you're trying to figure out what's going on, but it doesn't come right away. It comes piece by piece. So that's why we have these broken thoughts here, because this is a very chaotic situation, all right? As Mary is being beaten and tortured and eventually hanged, she is trying to figure out what is happening to her. And that comes piece by piece, which is why we have such confusion. So I want to go ahead and scroll down to the example here. And if you look in your annotation templates, you'll notice there is a section for syntax, okay, for sentence construction. And we're going to be using this model here, okay, to talk about the syntax, okay? And so the first one that we're going to use is this one here, and this is on our chart, and this is the example that's provided to you, okay? So this is going to be in the 7 p.m. section, the section that we just looked at above. We are talking about enjambment, okay? The breaking of sentences across lines of poetry, okay? And the word breaking is going to be very important here. The breaking of sentences across lines of poetry. And so we have our example here. Rumor was loose in the air. And this slash here, this just means that we are splitting the line of poetry in our writing. Because when you type, you don't have room to format the poem line, 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 okay? So what we do is we still write like this, rumor was loose in the air, yada, yada, yada. But then whenever we get to where the line splits on the poem, we just put a slash and then we continue. Okay, so that tells me or indicates that the line is splitting there. And that's very important because the line, the number of lines and stanzas is important in poetry. Okay, so rumor was loose in the air, hunting for some neck to land on. I was milking the cow, the barn door open to the sunset. And again, we have these enjambed sentences in the 7 p.m. section. Okay, so here is the explanation according to this model up here. Okay, so I just used this model and I created a sentence explaining what the enjambment does. Okay, so the enjambment, that's our syntactical choice. Of the sentences in the 7 p.m. section functions to mimic or to copy or emphasize the repeated and random starting and stopping of fragmented thoughts. Fragmented thoughts means broken, okay? So we draw a line from fragmented thoughts here. So the reason that we have broken sentences in the stanza is because as Mary is trying to figure out what is happening, these thoughts are broken. They're coming in piece by piece, okay? Broken thoughts, piece by piece, okay? So it functions to mimic the repeated and random starting and stopping of fragmented thoughts, which serves to emphasize the confusion and panic that Mary Webster would have experienced at the beginning of her ordeal. So when the men break into her barn and start beating and cursing at her and torturing her, she is feeling confused because it's very sudden. She is feeling panicked because she is fighting for her life. And because of that, that's why we have these fragmented thoughts. Think about it. When you are in a tough situation, when you are put on the spot, or when you are confused about what is happening, those thoughts come in piece by piece. The same thing with Mary here. Okay, so that's going to be the example of enjambment in the 7 p.m. section. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here, and then I'll create another video for the next section.